Mutual regulation between infants and caregivers. The attachment process that becomes so evident by the end of a baby's first year has its roots in early infancy. Right from the birth, mothers and newborns begin to interact in ways that draw them into a close emotional relationship. A crucial aspect of these early interactions is that each individual influences the other's behavior and adjusts to it, creating a smooth running system of mutual regulation. The key to develop this two-way system is effective communication between the infant and the caregiver. Crying is the most important form of infant communication. It serves as a powerful stimulus that can elicit maternal caregiving and is a behavior that infants can modify based on its outcomes. For crying to be an effective means of communication, it must vary and listeners must be able to recognize its different meanings. Babies use various types of cries to convey different messages. For example, as the pitch of crying increases, adult listeners tend to perceive the baby's problem as more serious and urgent. For crying to be truly communicative, listeners must be able to distinguish one type of cry from another. Caregivers need to understand whether the baby is saying, "I'm hungry," "I'm wet," or "I'm frightened." Interestingly, adults can become quite adept at interpreting babies' cries. This ability is partly based on experience. Generally, parents and other adults who have spent time around infants are better at decoding infant crying than those with little experience. The communicative role of crying involves both nature and nurture. Initially, crying is triggered by various internal stimuli, such as hunger, and external stimuli, such as a wet diaper. This type of crying primarily serves to draw the mother near. With experience, however, caregivers become more accurate at reading these signals, and babies learn to use crying as means of controlling the mother's attention and care. Emotion and affective system. Emotion are internal reactions or feelings, either positive or negative, that may indicate a readiness for action. Affect, on the other hand, is the outward expression of this emotion through facial expression, gestures, and other behaviors. An infant's ability to display and recognize affective states forms the foundation of mutual regulation with their mother. Babies' facial expressions of basic emotion appear at different stages of their development. From birth, babies can indicate distress by crying and interest by staring attentively. One stimulus that reliably arouses interest is the human face, illustrating how evolution encourages infant-mother interaction right from the beginning. Another inborn facial expression is disgust, which is triggered by unpleasant tastes or odors, usually signaling to the caregiver that feeding is not going well. By 3 months of age, smiling, which reflects pleasure, appears in response to familiar events such as the voice or face of a known person. Recent research suggests that 6 and 12 months old infants display different smiles in response to different types of pleasure, such as enjoyment or various aspects of a face-to-face caregiver-child interaction, including anticipation of the caregiver behavior and satisfaction after its completion. This further suggests that the positive emotional experiences of children are quite complex even midway through the first year of life. Sadness and anger, demonstrated experimentally by inducing frustration, for example by removing a teasing toy or restraining the baby's arm, first become evident in facial expressions around 4 months of age. Facial expressions indicating fear do not appear until about 7 or 8 months. Complex emotions, such as empathy, do not appear until the second year. Self-evaluative emotions, like shame and guilt, emerge between 2 and 3 years. Both biological timetables and cultural influences shape the development of these emotional responses. Socialization of emotion occurs through modeling and reinforcement. Older infants and preschoolers learn to use verbal labels to identify their emotions. Initially, emotions are freely displayed, but as infants develop, they learn to conceal or display them according to cultural norms known as display rules. Parental responses to infant emotions significantly affect the ability to regulate this emotion. From about 6 weeks old, infants can discriminate between different facial expressions, although they may not fully understand their meanings until they are around 5 to 6 months old. By the end of the first year, infants use emotional signals from others in their environment to regulate their own behaviors, a process known as social referencing, which is particularly evident in infant-mother interaction. Socialization of emotions. The emergence of emotions in infancy is primarily guided by biological processes and is universal across cultures. However, even in early infancy, this development is shaped by cultural practices. In cultures where infants are in nearly constant physical contact with caregivers, they have little need to express their emotions. For example, among the Inuit of Arctic Quebec, infants are almost always found in a pouch inside the mother's parka. In these circumstances, the infant's small postural changes or movements are sufficient to elicit a response from caregivers. Observers often remark on how little infants cry in communities where they are constantly held. Mothering is another way in which emotions are socialized. Most mothers, for instance, display only a few facial expressions to the babies, most of which are positive. The babies, in turn, tend to match their expressions. Older infants and preschoolers generally learn to identify and label their emotions through conversations with parents about feelings and through everyday experiences. Many parents frequently talk with their children about emotions, pointing out how a child is feeling. For example, "You seem to be angry with mommy," or "That baby must be feeling upset about dropping her ice cream cone," or the implication of the child's action on feelings of others. For example, "You made your little brother sad." Initially, children's affective expressions closely mirror their emotions, but over time, they increasingly learn to control their affective displays, so that what they express may not necessarily reflect what they are actually feeling. Why will children attempt to mask their feelings? Many of these reasons reflect children's increasing awareness of the emotional display rules of their culture. The expectation of attitudes regarding the expression of affect. Children began to show an understanding of such display rules as early as age 2. For example, boys may learn that displaying fear or pain is not seen as appropriate, so they often try to inhibit such expression of emotion. Recognizing emotions. An infant's ability to recognize facial expressions of emotion seems to develop in stages. Babies younger than 6 weeks are not very good in scanning faces for detail, so they do not recognize different emotional expressions. Soon after, however, infants begin to show evidence of discriminating facial expressions of emotion. For example, babies who have been habituated to a photo of a smiling face show renewed attention when the photo is changed to one depicting a frowning face. Babies of this age discriminate even better when they view talking faces displaying varying emotion, as the voice may also provide important cues. But do babies in this second stage truly understand the emotions being expressed? Probably not. It's more likely that they simply recognize that their faces look different, without appreciating that a sad look represents unhappiness or a smiling face represents joy. Once infants reach 5 to 6 months of age, however, they appear to develop a clearer understanding of the meaning of emotional expressions. This is shown, for example, by the fact that at this age babies begin to display the same emotion as the face they are viewing, for example, smiling at the happy face, and prefer some emotional expressions to others. Near the end of the first year, infants begin to use information about other people's emotional expressions to regulate their own behavior. Babies are especially likely to look to their mothers or fathers for this type of guidance when they are uncertain about what to do next, such as when they encounter an unfamiliar object or person. They then use their parents' expression as a guide to how to react in the situation. Face-to-face interaction between mother and infant are crucial for communication and attachment. Babies display cycles of attention and withdrawal, which help them develop the ability to use behavioral adjustments to regulate their emotions. Different patterns of behavior emerge in these early interactions. Caregivers adjust and coordinate their behaviors with the infant's cycles of attention and inattention, resulting in smooth interaction known as interactional synchrony. Recognizing times of enhanced infant attentiveness allow mothers to maximize teaching opportunities. Interactional synchrony forms the basis for the coordination of turn-taking patterns between infant and mother, such as the mother waiting for the infant to respond to overture and then responding back. This turn-taking is a precursor for conversational dialogue. Research has shown that infants of mothers who are high in affect mirroring, meaning they go their communicative behaviors to respond to input from the infant, display more positive affect. The still face paradigm is used to examine the effects of disrupting face-to-face interaction. Studies using this paradigm have consistently shown that disrupting synchronous interaction with a caregiver leads to distress reaction in infants, a finding supported by studies of infants whose mothers are experiencing depression. Additionally, premature infants who spend more time sleeping are less alert when awake and more frequently aware the gaze from the caregiver are more likely to experience disruption in face-to-face affective interaction.